Hey, deserved listeners, it's time for me to react to your comments from my videos from last week. Let's get to it. Big Ed video. Oopsy Daisy says, I was talking about love bombing in this episode. Oopsy Daisy says, I have borderline personality, and I tend to love bomb at the beginning because I really want to be loved and wanted. I'm eventually disappointed in feeling like the only one who cares in the relationship, and then I will begin to devalue them. If I'm treated well enough again, I can begin to feel happy again towards the other person, but this is sort of short-lived until more hurts and disappointments occur, causing me to believe that I'm not cared about or loved. It's a horrible thing to live with. Yeah, so this is what borderline personality is typified by when you are relationally traumatized, abandoned, betrayed. You, one, are desperate for closeness, and two, you're very distrustful, and three, you're very sensitive to perceived or real hurts, real betrayals. And so when you finally meet someone, you love bomb them because not on purpose, but you're just so desperate for closeness, and it feels so good to finally believe that maybe you're going to be loved, that you just want so much of them. You want to move fast, and you want to move in, and you want to get married, and you want to, and you also will shower them with compliments like, I've never felt like this before, and you're the best ever, because it feels that way. And then when there's a disappointment or hurt, which is inevitably going to happen in a relationship, it becomes expanded because of the wounds that you have. And so then you black and white it. You go from love bombing to devaluing, as you say, Oopsie Daisy, which is the technical term for the borderline black and whiting of relationship. And then you say, if I'm treated well enough again, if the person passes the test, if you will, then you can open up again. But, so I hope, Oopsie Daisy, and it sounds like maybe you have been to therapy and learned emotional regulation such that you can, you're entitled to your hurts. People sometimes will hurt our feelings. That happens. But it's important to know how to regulate our emotions, know how to see the situation as differentiatedly as possible, know how to communicate our feelings without pushing other people away in a way that is self-destructive. And it sounds like maybe you've done that. All right, this next comment from Willy says, how do you make yourself valuable? And once you make yourself valuable, how will you know it if other people don't acknowledge it? I'm not one of the people Dr. Honda described, in that I was never neglected or mistreated by my parents, and I don't think that I brag a lot or have illusions of grandeur, but still I've always wondered what I need to do to be worth something. So I'm guessing, Willy, you're responding to my discussion regarding the basis of narcissistic personality, which is to be neglected, mistreated, such that you believe you're nothing, and you're only one of the defenses available to children is to overcompensate for that notion that they've been told, and the notion that they really believe that they're worthless, by having defenses of grandeur and bragging and that kind of thing. And so you're saying, Willy, I'm not really like that. I was never terribly neglected or mistreated by my parents. I don't brag a lot, but I do have an underlying feeling of being worthless. So I'm sorry that you're going through that, Willy. I suspect that your childhood wasn't as great as you remember it being, because to feel like you're worthless, it comes from the outside. Children aren't born into the world feeling worthless. They're treated that way, and then they learn that lesson. It's not a fair lesson. It's not a true lesson. You, Willy, absolutely do have worth. Of course you do. So I'm glad that you're bringing this up, because this is a common, misperception on the internet that everything leads to everything, meaning that the way I described narcissistic personality and the basis of it, but it doesn't necessarily go the other way. If you are treated worthless, there are many different personality disorders that you can develop and schemas that you can develop, narcissism being one of them, but it's not the only one. Whereas narcissistic personality always has a devaluation history. Linda says, now, and I want to be clear, the devaluation history might not be literally a parent saying you have no value, but it could be a parent who is sick and in the hospital for a couple years while the child is 1 or 2 years of age. And the child isn't being treated like they're worthless, but they feel worthless because they're not getting that constant love and attention that they crave and neurologically need from their parents at that age, or their caregivers at that age. Linda says, excellent video. It really resonated with me. I've been the recipient of love bombing, and I've also experienced the flip side by love bombing other people. When there are no words to describe others' behavior, it's easy to assign a label that's not accurate before you gain a deeper understanding of who they are and their history. To have that insight and understanding is instrumental on many different levels. As always, thanks for another informative video. Yeah, Linda, I'm glad that you hold that value, that these labels that we throw around on the internet in particular, it's not very wise. We need to understand where people are coming from and understand how they got there. There's almost always a logical reason as to why they got there. But the common premise that people, or a paradigm that people are operating from, is there are good people and there are bad people. There's Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader. There's, the Smurfs, and then there's that other guy. And so it's this simplistic black or white way of thinking that we hopefully can graduate from as children. It's normal for kids to think in those terms, but as adults, we would hope that we would have graduated from that. So, yeah, Jovi and Yara talked about alcoholism in that episode. Sophia says, I like how you said suffers from toxic masculinity. I'm going to use that. Yeah, I use that on purpose. I don't usually hear people saying it that way, or maybe ever. Maybe I have. Hard to know. But I will say that that's what I believe. That toxic masculinity, and the way that toxic masculinity is often discussed, it's like men choose to be toxic, or they had several roads before them and they chose the toxic masculine route. And that's not true. Men are subjected to toxic masculinity. They are abused by toxic masculinity. They are invaded by toxic masculinity. They're invaded by masculinity, and some of it happens to be toxic and harmful and not helpful to anyone, including themselves. And so suffering, it's really a suffering. And that's important to understand. Instead of feminism, so as I went down the path of feminism, the first paradigm, or mindset I had, was that men were subjecting women to mistreatment, and that women were victims and men were the perpetrators. And certainly that's one way to see it, and there's absolutely examples of that for sure. But over time, I learned to zoom out even further and say that actually everyone, including men, are victims of sexism, victims of some of our gender socialization. Not only do we teach men things that are very destructive to them themselves, toxic men, like you can't have feelings, that kind of thing, but we also teach men that they have to become overbearing of women. They have to be in control. They have to assert their dominance over women. That's very time consuming, and it takes a lot of energy to do that, and you push people away from you. So everyone's suffering from toxic masculinity. Mostly women, of course, but men included. H.C. Aballero says, I used to travel a lot for work, weeks at a time, and noticed I became... So in the episode, I think I was talking, maybe someone actually suggested this possibility, I can't remember, but that Jovi may have developed a drinking problem based on his job. And he talked about how he didn't drink while he would be on the job. And so I think I was talking about there's a culture in some jobs where you have these intense work periods, and then afterwards it's just like total binge drinking. I knew guys in the military who were like that. I actually had a friend who died in Afghanistan that did that. In Afghanistan, and whenever he was deployed, and he was deployed frequently, he was Special Forces, Green Beret, and he would not drink at all while he was deployed. But when he came back to Seattle, it was just not, him and all of his friends, it was just non-stop drinking. And he was a medic, he was a Special Forces medic, and so he knew how to account for hangovers. I won't go into details, but anyway. I used to travel for work weeks at a time and noticed I became a binge drinker. I justified it by telling myself I worked so hard and stayed sober while at work that I should allow myself to let go and drink. It took me a long time and several major consequences before I saw my drinking for what it was. Yeah, well, I'm glad that you found that. All right, this next comment is from Kira. They say, are negative consequences the only indicators that someone has a problem with drinking? I always assume drinking also becomes a problem for someone when it is used as their sole coping mechanism and or when it becomes compulsive, i.e. when they need it and couldn't go a week without a drink. In any case, I'd be concerned and not happy if my partner drank every night after work, even if they didn't have immediate negative consequences from it. Yeah, so this is a very complicated topic and I could go on and on about it, but in a nutshell, I include those as negative consequences. That the definition of a disorder with substances is when there are negative consequences. But what is a negative consequence? How big does a consequence have to be in order for it to qualify for this? It's a very foggy area. But anyway, drinking you're saying, I assume drinking becomes a problem for someone when it's used as their only way of coping with emotions, right? Or with situations. Now, what I'll say about that is that there's nothing wrong with using substances as your only way of coping with a difficult situation because you have a problem and you solved it. The problem is the solution to the problem causes problems. So when you are experiencing grief or distress or abandonment or something and you drink and the drinking takes away the problem, you have effectively solved your problem. You have done a good job as a human. We problem solve. But the problem is the solution causes problems. So that's important. And like one of the problems is the addiction and the problems to your health and your life, all the things that addiction carries with it. But also, you deny yourself the ability to deal with things in a more healthy way, in a way that you actually talk it out, or you go back to the original person and you say, hey, you kind of hurt my feelings, or something like that. Or you explore what's going on inside of you that caused you to have that distress, something along those lines. You deny yourself that possibility. So when people use but it's sort of semantics, but I include that as a negative consequence. You also say when it becomes compulsive, when they need to drink. So you're saying that I was saying that when you compulsively drink, if there are no negative consequences, then everything's fine. Well, technically yes, but that never happens. It never happens that you now, if you had a week of compulsive drinking, maybe you wouldn't have any long-term, but typically once you get to the compulsive stage of drinking where you need to drink, perhaps all day long. We don't know if Jovi does that. There are some minor red flags of that. We don't know. But if you need to drink, then there are going to be problems. There are going to be so many problems. There are going to be problems with your health. There are going to be problems with your memory. There are going to be problems with your work. There are going to be problems with your driving, your parenting, your being organized, your health. So many problems. Legal problems. So many problems. And then you also say, but the point is the reason why we want to look at the problems and not the signs of the problems is we don't want to pathologize the signs. We want to pathologize the problems. It might take us a while to discover those problems because the person might not reveal those things, but we don't want to pathologize the signs. Like, what's an analogy? It'd be like if you saw someone that looked like a toxic masculine guy. I don't know. I don't want to call anyone out, but just, in your head, imagine what a toxic masculine guy looks like. There's probably a fedora involved. I don't know. But just think about that. But if you saw someone like that, you don't, and maybe even the way they talk, maybe there's some line, hey bro, what up bro? Just think, I guess Charlie would be a good example. Just because someone looks like that and they have all the signs, we don't want to pathologize the signs. Now, it often means toxic masculinity, but sometimes it doesn't. So in society, we don't want to pathologize fedoras or dudes who say bro or guys who like to have protein powder and work out at some of you probably do. Anyway, point is that's not okay because those behaviors there's nothing wrong with that. There's something wrong with being sexist and misogynist and dominant and mansplaining and all this, that's a problem. So in the same way, when it comes to substance abuse problems, we don't want to pathologize the signs, the red flags. We want to identify the problems that actually occur. They are almost always there, if not always there, when you see the signs, like having a compulsive need to drink. Chloe says, I'm from South Louisiana, where Jovi is from, and alcoholism is honestly part of the culture. It would be difficult for me to think of one adult male that I know that doesn't have an alcohol problem. My dad was an alcoholic. My friends' dads were alcoholic. My uncles, friends, cousins, etc. It's very normalized there. I didn't realize it was a problem until I moved away and realized that it wasn't normal. Chloe, interesting. I didn't know that about South Louisiana. So according to you, and you would know, there's a higher prevalence rate, particularly among men, of alcoholism. Interesting. A different Jovi and Yara episode where there was the lie detector. Kitty Loves Cubby says, Dr. Honda, I found your way of assisting a client interpret a dream very interesting. Would you please consider doing a video on this topic? I have. It's called Dream Analysis. It's for patrons only, though. But I occasionally will do audio episodes on, just search my channel by the word dream, and you'll probably get information on that. But, I'll probably talk about it again. Good old Stella Annie. By the way, Stella Annie, did you get your prize for being the, what was it? What I call it? The best YouTube the best YouTube commenter of 2021. Stella Annie won the top YouTube commenter award of 2021. So she says, what rattles me is the expression of shock and horror of the thought that Jovi slept with someone who's a stripper. What rattles me is the expression of shock and horror of the thought that Jovi slept with someone who's a stripper. That's just a profession among others. I can't believe we're even still talking about this. Totally agree, Stella. It's really bizarre that in today's world, we're still acting like children when it comes to, or not like children, but like Victorian people with sticks up their butts. It's like, it's fine if someone's a stripper. Like, let it go. It's okay. It's not gonna kill you. Bill says polygraph tests do not detect lies. So there's a polygraph in this episode, and I was talking about how polygraphs don't work. Science has demonstrated that a long time ago. And just imagine if we had a lie detector test. Just imagine if we had that, how we would just not have to do any criminal hearings ever again. We just hook some up to a lie detector test, and there you go. Polygraph tests do not detect lies. They are an interrogation tactic. During an interrogation, the police absolutely can legally lie to you about your results in order to obtain a confession. I'm so glad you clarified this immediately. Yeah, and don't even get me started about how police can lie during interrogations. I've actually had that happen to me and my clients, and please listen to my other episodes on this, but essentially the detective destroyed my relationship with my client because the detective lied to my client and said that I told the detective something that I never told the detective. I didn't tell the detective anything, because why would I? And then the client hated me because the client thought the police officer was telling the truth, and I went to the police officer and their boss, and I said, will you please not ruin my relationship with a client just because you're trying to find information? Like, you just completely ruin this person's life trying to investigate a different crime. Like, why would you do that? And him and the superior said, this is how we do things. So shut up and go away. And I was like, wow, serve and protect. Wonderful. Gino and Jasmine video. We're meeting them. This is the toothbrush episode. Sabia says, if I, as a woman, had thinning hair and wore, so this is, Gino wears this hat, right? And Jasmine was like, take off your hat. And I was like, whoa, like, if he doesn't want to take off his hat, that's fine. And I'm just guessing, Jasmine, that you have some things about your look that you don't like to, change when, especially on camera, so everyone's entitled to their own body and what they wear to cover things or whatever. Sabia says, If I, as a woman, had thinning hair and wore hair extensions to look and feel better about my appearance, I would be so annoyed if any potential partner insisted that I remove them knowing my insecurities. Ugh. Yeah, agreed. Just because it's a man and just because Gino is the way that he is, somehow it makes it okay, and it's just not okay. Caroline says, as someone married to an engineer, I want to say that the practicality of an electric toothbrush is a total engineer gift. They are into practical things. That's how they show their love. LOL. Yeah, I've heard that about engineers. In Seattle, we have Boeing, so there's a fair amount of engineers, and I know a fair amount of engineers, and I wouldn't say they're all like that, but yeah, I could see that. Mike and Jimena video. Zimak says, as someone who also has to take care of a family member, it can be hard finding someone who is okay to date when they learn about your arrangement. But there are times when it's scary to make a change and let yourself be vulnerable to someone else, so you devote even more time to your family member instead of yourself. Oh, interesting. Yeah, it's interesting to think about, Mike's path in life. We could see a lot of different possibilities as to, how he got to where he is now. But maybe we'll learn more as time goes on. Julian says, I agree with you what you said, doctor. When it comes to finally meet someone face to face, and then realizing the chemistry is very different. Yeah. So I was talking about how you can over text or over the phone have just massive amounts of chemistry, and then you meet in person and it just poof, no chemistry. That happens sometimes, and that's why often it's recommended that when you're online dating, that as soon as possible, you got to meet them in person because you don't want to waste your time in that way, depending on your goals. Natalie, video, my dogs are barking. Institutionalized says, as someone who tried dating other sober people in a large city, it is exceptionally difficult to find someone who is fully sober and also compatible. Yeah, absolutely. I was talking about how Natalie should date, she should on Tinder or something, I don't know if they have that on Tinder, but other dating sites that will have usually a box, or even in the description, the ability to say, I don't want to date anyone who drinks. I just want to be with someone who's completely sober and doesn't use any substances. And I was like, that's totally fine. Just do that. Find that person. Don't just date randomly, because if you date randomly, in all likelihood, the person's going to drink occasionally, So, but institutionalized is saying, as a sober person trying to date other sober people, trying to find another person to date that is also sober, it's very limiting. Yeah, and I could see that. Mia says, men who wear a fedora and say, I'm pretty good with women, this is universally coded for, I'm a pickup artist douchebag. Yeah, you wonder, if he ascribed to some echo chamber of silliness. I could see maybe not, but I wouldn't be surprised. Anyway, Linda says, I don't really think that Natalie wants to date a vegetarian Christian man who doesn't not drink. I think she wants someone who will give up alcohol and meat for her, because that is how she feels like she is important. Interesting. That could be, that's not how I would word it, but we learned in a future episode that I haven't aired yet, but will soon air, I think, that Natalie has some traumas from growing up and might have some abandonment issues and might have a lot of distrust of other people, maybe particularly men, and might put a lot of people through tests. We don't know that, but it's possible. It's not uncommon for someone with her background to have that. And then one of the ways you test is to find someone who drinks and says, stop drinking, because if they do stop drinking, then that's a very concrete piece of evidence that, oh, they are dedicated to me. They do really want to be with me. Of course, that's self-sabotaging, right? All right, y'all. Well, as you can see by the shirt and the Christmas tree, either today is Christmas or yesterday was Christmas. I don't know when this is going to be posted. The pod wife is in charge of posting all that stuff. By the way, some people think when I say pod wife, it's disrespectful to her. I would never call her something that hurt her feelings. I hope everyone would trust me on that. Whatever you celebrate, or if you celebrate nothing, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because you deserve it. You really, really do.